This week, we'll be talking to Henning Brauer about OpenNTPD and its recently revived portable version. After that, we're going to be discussing different ways to securely tunnel your traffic, specifically OpenVPN, IPSEC, SSH, and of course, Tor. All that and the latest news coming up on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 76, Time for a Change, recorded February 11th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got an exciting show, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about today, so we're going to just dive right into it. But first up in the headlines this week, speaking of time, this is an interesting bug that was found this last week in FreeBSD 11.
Yes.
So you go ahead and give us the details on that.
So
I saw it go by the mailing list, and it was like, what?
Yeah. Everybody started, a bunch of people in rapid succession started noticing all of a sudden their FreeBSD machine was behaving very strangely. I actually encountered this as well. The router machine that I use here is running head for various reasons, one of them being Beehive. And one day, all of a sudden, it wouldn't give a DHCP lease to my entertainment system in the living room. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I try to log into it, and it's all acting, certain things aren't happening, but certain things are. I'm like, is the hard drive dying? What's happening here? And I couldn't get it. And then eventually I just got it to the point where it wouldn't do anything. It was everything was stalled waiting for something to happen or something. And I ended up having to reboot it. And so I did.
And rebooting did fix it, right?
Yeah. And then like a day later, I hear tons of other people having the same issues or related issues. I'm like, what happened? And then somebody posted on the mailing list, and they think they figured it out. And it says sometime between December 10th and January 7th, a timing bug was introduced into FreeBSD head. And if you're using, kern.hertz equals 1,000, which is 1,000 ticks per second, which is the default on bare metal. But if you're running it in a VM, the default's only 100.
Sure.
That means that after 24.6 days of uptime, your tick count will have reached the 32-bit overflow point. And when that happens, your machine breaks.
Right. So it looks, but I guess the initial cause of this was something about adding a C flag build option.
No, that was the solution.
Clang.
So yeah, it took a little while to figure out what the problem was, because none of the code that affected none of the code around the problem had been touched in years. Yeah. It was like, why all of a sudden is this causing a problem? Then somebody realized that in that time frame, they imported Clang 3.5, upgrading the base system from Clang 3.4 to 3.5. And one of the changes there is that technically when, was it a unsigned or assigned integer overflows, that behavior is undefined in the C specification. And so Clang has an optimization that was because of that, we will just assume that won't happen, or, it makes a bunch of optimizations, meaning I don't have to check and deal with that because that's not supposed to happen.
Sure.
But the FreeBSD kernel depended on that happening.
Right. It was
Yeah. And so, something got further optimized, and all of a sudden things were breaking. And, this reminded Peter of a similar problem he had noticed and debugged back in 1998 or something with TCP and the tick counter overflowing. And so he actually revised some old code he had for that, which basically started. So when the machine boots, the tick timer starts at the maximum value of an integer minus 10 minutes.
Sure.
So that if this bug ever reoccurs, the machine will break after 10 minutes instead of 24.6 days. Yeah. So people will notice sooner and fix it.
Yeah, we'll see it much, much faster next time.
Yeah.
But for those who don't know, this was only in head, by the way. So if you're running, 10.0, 10.1, etc., you're not
completely safe.
Susceptible. Yeah, this was just something in the bleeding edge.
Yeah, if you were running the development version in a small window, then 24 days later, kaboom. So the fix was to add an extra C flag that specifically tells Clang, hey, don't optimize this out and do this specific thing when it overflows. And it'll cause the counter to wrap back to 0 or to negative. I forget if it was assigned or unsigned. And so anyway, it fixes the problem. And so that C flag has been added and it works on Clang and GCC. So,
and those kind of bugs are a pain to figure out though, because it takes so long to replicate it. And after 24 days of uptime, everyone's like, well, I don't know what I've done. Like, what happened? I'm sure yours just in the morning you woke up and it just didn't work, right?
Yeah, mine was I was going to watch TV while I ate my lunch and the machine wouldn't get a DHCP address and talk to my file server. I'm like, what's going on here? And I try to poke the router and it's like acting all strange. And like, after lunch, I'm going to have to like see if it's the hard drive or what's going on. And then I eventually rebooted and everything was fine. I was like, what happened? And then like a day later, I see everybody else having the same thing. It's like, well, if I had known, I would have warned people. But I didn't know that was what the problem was.
Thank you guys for figuring out what that was. That'll make 11 a lot more stable with better uptime when it releases.
Yeah, it's better in 24.6 days anyway.
That's right.
So yeah, that's quite an interesting one. Oh, and Peter posted an update about the cluster update. So the FreeBSD cluster is hundreds of machines, as we talked about when we interviewed him. Sure. And they have like a staggered update. So at one point, they realized that it's the 24.6 days of uptime because they would just watch the machines drop one after another every couple. And eventually they're like, all right, this machine's going to stop doing what it's supposed to be doing in a few minutes. And so some of them, they started just rebooting them when they got to 24 days. So they would come back up and keep working until they figured out what the problem was.
You might want to update here and make sure you're past this issue, especially if you have something that you're not, running on like a laptop where you're shutting it off every day. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going
to
have to update my router because it's still running the old version, just rebooted once. So I have like
you only
17
have a few
days
left,
or something left to update it before it's going to explode again.
That's right. Well, okay. Well, next is some OpenBSD news this week. So we've been talking a lot about mail servers, OpenSMTPD in the last couple of weeks, but we had a cool blog article that got posted talking about setting up OpenSMTPD on its native OpenBSD environment this week. So the past ones we've looked at have been on FreeBSD and Linux. So in addition to the usual steps of setting up OpenSMTPD, this one also covers DKIM proxy, ClamAV for scanning attachments, of course DevCop for IMAP, and multiple choices of spam filtering. So you can take your pick between like SpamD or Spam Assassin. It'll show you how to set that up. It also shows you how to set up a nice round-cube interface. So if you want to be able to access your mail through the web using the in-base HTTPD that's in OpenBSD, it'll walk you through that process, which is pretty slick.
Roundcube is nice. It's kind of a Gmail-esque without the Google part.
Right. Just
so if you're security cons, it's quite useful. And this is a really nice one. It's 8 parts and all broken down nicely, and it looks like a very thorough walkthrough.
Well, this is more of like the complete solution, right?
Yes.
You go from nothing to having webmail set up, everything set up, all your spam filtering and
even virus scanning and everything.
Yeah, that's really good. So if you're looking for something that's going to walk you through from 0 to being done, like take a look at this blog article, and because it's split up, you can take it in chunks and do it as you have the time. But it's how many categories? It's split up into
8.
Looks like 8. So yeah. And let's see.
Setting it up, adding SpamD, doing ClamAV, and doing it at SMTP time as a proxy in front, so you don't even let it get further into your mail server. Spam Assassin using DimKim proxy to do mail signing, Dovecot and Dovecot Pigeonhole for your IMAP server, and then Roundcube and the HTTPD to provide the webmail, and then a conclusion. So that's everything you need to get going.
Yeah, fantastic. So another good weekend project, folks. If you're looking to set up a mail server, take a look at this. Okay, next up, Dragonfly news this week. We got a neat article about how Dragonfly uses Git. It looks like this is part of a series of posts from Matthew Dillon, the project lead over at Dragonfly, talking about their version control system. But Dragonfly, for those who don't know, along with PC-BSD and EdgeBSD, are using Git as their primary version control systems for system source code. And in this case, for For DragonFly, they're using vanilla Git over SSH with developers' accounts set to Git only, so no shell access. And then the maintainers of the servers are the one that have shell access, of course. And he details how you can go ahead and set up a cron job syncs from a master to a public box that anybody can check out code from. And TJ has a note here. It'd be interesting to hear about how the other BSD projects manage their master source repository.
Yes, I'd like to know a little bit more about the FreeBSD one because they have SVN set up with all kinds of hooks that prevent people from doing things. You know, when it's before release time and they do a freeze, you can't commit unless you have an approved by release engineering line in your commit message, and you know they have rules about making sure you don't commit too big of a thing at once, and lots of different little.
I always get bit by the one in ports where when you add a new patch, sometimes you have to set like the no flags or no keywords. So I'm always looking, and I don't do it often enough, right? It's like once every 6 months. So I'm always looking up like, wait, how do I do the prop set on that file again? And figure it out because I do everything in Git now. So it's like going back to Subversion. I know you're a big Subversion fan, Alan. So I won't. I'm not get too much.
I've gotten used to Git so far enough that I can use it when I have to, which is an improvement over what it was before. My first couple of ventures in Git, I made a hell of a mess. I definitely see the advantages of Git in some places. Although sometimes it's just like, why can't it just do what I want?
Right? Just do it.
Yeah. But yeah, I've used both and I can live with both, and that's good enough for me. There's a guide going up in the FreeBSD wiki about how to use that as a workflow and actually, you know, do Git SVN in the final bit to just commit using SVN, but do everything else with Git, so that people that prefer that can have an easy time with that.
Okay. Well, we'll have to ask the next time we talk to the Edge BSD folks how they use Git as well. We had another interesting article this week talking about why not try PC-BSD. Interesting. Interestingly enough, this was on itwire.com, and it was an interview I did.
Yes, I see a picture of you.
There, right? And so I think you can see right behind me where I took the picture, right next to the poster where you got BSD spearing the penguin, which I thought was a great background for the photo. But we took that this last week. But anyway, they asked me a bunch of questions about switching from Linux to BSD. You know, what's the experience going to be like for an end user? And just, you know, a lot of basic questions like, is the same software available even on FreeBSD? So we went through all that and talked about basically FreeBSD, PC-BSD, what the differences are, how they're pretty much the same, just configured differently, and what the experience should be like for people switching. But interestingly enough, they prompted this article because they're seeing a lot of people asking for it. They said with the adoption of systemd, there's been a lot of dissatisfaction with Linux. So here, I'll just read the quote the way it is here. With the growing adoption of systemd, dissatisfaction with Linux has reached proportions not seen in recent years due to the extent that people are starting to talk of switching to FreeBSD. So that's kind of what prompted them to want to do this article. And they did another one with Kirk McCusick, I think the week before as well, talking about some of the differences there. So fascinating series. It sounds like they got a neat thing going, and they've seen a lot of traffic on this article. So if you have friends who are complaining about systemd and looking for an alternative, this may be the article you want to show to them and kind of get them on board.
Yep. I have to make sure this goes up on the FreeBSD front page.
Yes, you got to make that happen, Alan.
Yep.
So I think I emailed you. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw that. I'm going to look into that.
Okay. Yeah. If you reply, maybe we'll have an article by you here soon.
Yes. I'm going to see if there's someone that might be better for it first, but if not, I will do it.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Now, before we hit into the interview we did for this week, we do want to mention our first sponsor, which this week we're going to start up with iXsystems. And it looks like we got a cool new link they sent us about their production practices. So you have that up on the page there, Alan? You want
to have a nice picture of this. You know, when you think of a technology company, you don't necessarily think of a literal assembly line like they have here. But, you know, they put together a lot of servers, and they want to make sure they're all done exactly right. And so this is a blog post by the production manager, Chris Williams, and he talks about why the way they do it is an important consideration for you. You know, they have to make sure that all their employees, and the number fluctuates depending on the time of year and how busy they are and so on, but they have to have the policies, procedures, tools, and leadership to make sure that everything gets done right. And, you know, if you've seen inside some of these IX servers, they go to extreme lengths to make sure that the SATA cables are routed for the best airflow and that everything is done very, very nicely. And to talk about, the first they receive the base part, they have to get processors from Intel and memory and all the various components, and then they have to check those, make sure they're good, and that they're all put together, and then we assemble them into a system and upgrade all the subsystems, make sure all the components are in, and then they have to go through that QA process. As you can see here on the assembly line, you can see the servers get powered up and get a keyboard and a monitor connected to them, and they run I think a live CD they have, and
does the burn-in.
Yeah, they run those servers for a while to make sure everything works, and they're monitoring the temperature, make sure that they got good thermal contact and that everything is working exactly how it's supposed to, and that the machine is going to work for you when they ship it to you. And then they also
need to see the assembly line picture like that.
Exactly, and they custom configure the machines as well. Like when you buy a server from them, you get this big worksheet where you fill out exactly how you want the BIOS configured, and do you want it to try to boot off the network or not, and all the different configurations. And then they will install the OS for you and partition it exactly how you want and install which version of BSD or Linux or whatever you want on it. And they just make sure it's exactly right. And then the packaging. I've never had such nice packaging. They ship the hard drive separately in like super duper ooper foam so that that the hard drive's not going to have been damaged in shipping no matter what.
The shipping company. Typical Amazon packaging where the drive's thrown in a cardboard box with like one little air bubble wrap thing in the corner
or
of the
like
box
some crunchy plastic around it, and that's it.
Right?
No, this is like you could just sit there and kick the box all day and the hard drive wouldn't feel it.
So yeah, that's definitely the white glove treatment, because you want your stuff to work when it shows up and it's already gone through that burn-in, and they've sorted out all the issues before it's even made it to your data center or to your home or wherever you're having it shipped.
Yeah, and I think that's the other big thing is that considering all the stuff they're doing here and that they're doing by hand compared to buying a server that's sitting in a box already, you're getting something custom built. But they also make sure that you get it in a reasonable amount of time, right? Like you place an order and it's going to take the 2 or 3 days for them to build it and do the QA on it, but you're not going to be waiting weeks and weeks for your server. When you order it, it's going to get built, shipped, and sent to you as quickly as possible, while making sure it's done exactly right as well. And I think that's the biggest one is you actually get delivery on, if they say it's going to be delivered by this day, it's going to be delivered by that day. And when you're trying to plan something, or like, oh, we're running out of capacity, we need 2 more servers and we need them right now, knowing that they're going to be here in exactly 6 days, not in
not whenever
2 to 6 weeks like you get from some places, that makes a big difference.
So we're joined now by Henning Brauer from the OpenBSD project. So thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Hello, thank you for bearing with me again.
Yes.
So
it's
obviously
it's the first time we do this with you not sitting next to me.
Yeah, this is a little different, and you're very far away too.
It's the weather is quite a bit different. I remember in Malta we were sweating profusely, and it's like Canadian weather back here.
Right.
Yeah, now we are sweating and you're freezing.
Yeah, that's right.
And the wonders of technology make sure that I don't appear upside down.
Yes.
That is correct. So, hey, we've had you on the show, obviously, so we've asked you how you got into BSD, so we're just going to hop right into the questions here. So you're here to talk to us about OpenNTPD, so tell us what it is, how and why did this get started?
Well, I don't have to explain NTP, I think, the time synchronization protocol.
Sure.
The story about this, it goes back to 2004, I think. Basically, I was working on BGPD, and the framework I wrote for BGPD for privilege separation and the message passing, the internal communication stuff, turned out to be pretty flexible and nicely abstracted from the rest of BGPD. And at the same time, we figured out that very few people were actually running NTP clients foremost on their machines, so their clocks were unsynchronized. was very common back then to just have to set the time and start up and be done with it. And one of the major goals was to provide an easy-to-use NTP daemon, foremost the client side. That's so easy to use that everybody would just turn it on to keep their clock synchronized. And of course, this being an OpenBSD project with a focus on security.
Right.
So back then, I had to deal with another developer that I write the network-facing parts, and he does the time magic. So I sat down and wrote the network part, and he did not write the time magic.
All right.
But since I had all the network stuff, I kind of wanted to see this working. So I added the time stuff and worked out quite well. It was fine. Accuracy was okay, not superb, but okay. The server side, like redistributing the clock, was also trivial, so we added that as well. And over time, it evolved, and we have a very different approach from the other NTPDs because we have more of it in the kernel, basically. We have less in userland, so the integration is stronger. And over time, we tied those even closer together so that the NTPD would adjust the frequency of the clock in the machine for the systematic errors. And with that, we got to an accuracy that's pretty damn good. And, well, definitely more than good enough for what we wanted to do. And yeah, that's how it was born.
Yeah, cool. So I guess, could you tell us which features differentiate OpenNTPD from something like the ISC NTPD?
Well, foremost, you can use it without spending a week reading documentation. Because it actually is very, very simple to use. And that was one of the major goals. As I said, we wanted basically everybody to run it. It is almost true for OpenBSD users, at least. The other NTPD has lots of, let's say, niche features, like stuff that very, very, very few people need, that make the entire thing pretty complex, and we don't want that. Like we focused and still do, on the common use cases. And of course, if you look at the history of the XMPP implementation, we don't want our users having to patch their damn NTPD for security holes all the time.
Right. Those rarely used features turned out to be the vulnerability with the NTP reflection attacks, right?
Those are long-term liabilities.
Yeah.
Especially when you have appliances and stuff that the user doesn't even know actually have an NTP daemon built into them.
Oh, the OpenNTPD is actually running on DSLAMs and stuff like that. So you would never expect a Unix-like operating system to run on these things, right? So it's completely invisible, and especially in these kind of installations, that thing just has to work.
So it looks like the portable version for other operating systems has been revived.
I'm so
mostly
happy.
thanks to mostly thanks to Brent Cook. Can you tell us a little bit more about the portable version specifically?
Yeah, well, for the portable, you really have to talk to him, but unfortunately, he's not here. So I'm trying my best. So in the old days, we had a portable that was done by Darren Tucker, who's also doing the OpenSSH portable. And unfortunately, at some point, he ran out of time and resources to keep maintaining it. Well, I think it's called life.
Sure.
And ever since then, the portable was stuck at the version we had back then. What was it, 3.9 or so?
Sure.
Something like that, yes.
And we're approaching 5.7, right? So that's a solid 5 years almost.
Yep.
Yeah, almost 5 years. And this was also before some of the big accuracy improvements went in. So this was kind of sad. And over the years, I kept asking people for help with the portable, and every now and then there was somebody showing up, offering help, and I'll do it. But nothing ever materialized.
Sure.
And eventually, when Brent Cook showed up, he got sucked into the portable LibreSSL, and I think with a little pressure from Theo, He looked
gentle pressure.
gentle pressure,
Right.
suggestion,
A small nudge.
a suggestion from Theo. He looked at the portable OpenNTPD and how long did it take him initially? It was amazing, like 2 days or so.
Oh, geez.
He had a perfectly working portable again, and yeah, published it, and very happy about that.
Nice.
So what's the development model like, the differences between the portable version and the native version? Like you mentioned that a lot of the code is in the kernel, so obviously that has to be different for the portable version.
Well, it's not that different. So the basic development model is the same that we apply for OpenSSH, for example. So we have the native version in OpenBSD. We don't really want to compromise there for portability. Like we are not artificially making portability hard, but if we, in places where portability means we have to add stuff that is in the way, we won't do this in the OpenBSD version, but this will be added in the portable.
Sure.
So in the OpenBSD version, we'll use OpenBSD APIs and functions where they are more appropriate, or there is no alternative in, say, POSIX at all. And if that function doesn't exist on other operating systems, we'll provide a compatibility layer that provides those functions. So the native version stays very clean.
Right.
That makes sense. So how's the community involvement been since the portable version's been revived, and are you sharing fixes between them?
Yes, we do. We got a couple of reports from the portable. It was all very minor stuff. I mean, the OpenNTPD is pretty mature by now. It's not like and it's still a pretty simple daemon. I mean, you have to keep this in mind. This is not a very complex thing. So there wasn't anything big showing up, but several small fixes came back from the portable, yeah.
Okay,
cool.
The reaction from the community was very positive. Again, for details, you have to talk to Brent.
Yep.
right.
Yes, we've talked to him before. We'll have to get him again.
We got a fair share of feedback and suggestions and fixes.
Cool.
Worked out well.
So are there any plans to add some sort of authentication to OpenNTPD?
Oh. There is no clear yes and no clear no. I would like to see that. The authentication mechanisms they have in the standards, I just looked at them and sorry, no way. No way. The suggested method, current suggested method, because there's more than one, of course.
Of course.
Is using X509 and everything, so the code for the authentication would be bigger than the OpenNTPD code.
Oh, man.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No. And it requires way too much setup. I would like to see a pretty automatic way, but no promises, vague ideas. As usual, time is an issue. Hey, time is an issue for NTPD. This is about my time. So finding the time to look deeper into it and get clear on the concept and eventually write code. As said, definitely no promises. It's not that I don't have other ideas or get sucked into other sub-projects.
Yep.
So I can't really say. I'd like to see it, but it is not a simple problem. It's not a simple problem to solve, especially since well, in a perfect world, we build something that the other implementations also implement is somewhat compatible. But as said, the X509 way is an absolute no-go, and the older way doesn't look like it's feasible either. So I really don't know yet.
Okay. So how about hardware support? If you guys have any hardware support for things like GPS devices, or could you run like a Stratum zero-time server?
We do, and you can run a Stratum Zero. In OpenBSD, we have the sensors framework, which contains sensors indicating, for example, whether your laptop lid is open or closed.
Your battery is.
Yeah, how full your battery is, stuff like that. And in that framework, we have time sensors, which basically just provide time. And there is there's support for several GPS-based ones, and I think it's a European thing, DCF77. That's a radio-based thing. Are there more?
I haven't done enough there, so I don't know. I know those two, but I don't know if there's other ones.
Yeah, same here. The nice part from NTPD side is it's just time sensors. So if there's a new class of devices showing up, as long as they provide a time sensor, we don't even have to touch OpenNTPD.
Oh, that's perfect.
So there's obviously every once in a while some disagreement about the trade-offs between having the utmost accuracy versus good enough accuracy for most users. What's your take on that?
Well, there are a lot of myths about our accuracy out there, which are just not true. As I mentioned initially, we did not really focus on best accuracy, and I'm still inclined to say it's not our prime focus. Because getting your clock within 20 nanoseconds or something sounds nice, but that's a very strange use case or very rare use case.
Sure.
And there's a price to pay for that.
Right. And if you need it that accurate, you probably need it even more. And then you're looking at precision time protocol rather than just the network time protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. So the accuracy we reach is really, really, really good. I don't even have numbers, but the offsets we are seeing are so small. We are talking like 1 or 2 milliseconds. I say that's good enough for 99% of use cases.
Well, and you said that the old portable version before the update was missing some of those accuracy improvements, right?
Foremost was missing the frequency adjustment. So the way that NTPD corrects your machine's time is by skewing the length of one tick. So basically, when it figures out that your clock is behind, it'll make a second slightly longer, shorter,
so you speed up.
Sure, yeah, catching you back up.
So, and eventually we'll hit the right time and be synchronized. And over time, we'll figure out that we have to readjust slightly. And that's the systematic error in the hardware clocks. And once we figured out that systematic error, we adjust the frequency permanently to cope with that systematic error. And that's the bit that was missing in the old portable. And we do have that now.
Okay, nice.
We had this in the native version for a long time. It was just missing in the portable.
Okay. Well, do you think there could be potentially different use cases between the different implementations? For example, like having OpenNTPD on the internet-facing device, but then you have the ISCNTP somewhere hidden deep in the lab?
Well, since you're asking me as a 100% neutral person on that question,
right?
Well, I would not run the other implementation facing a network.
Okay.
There's been too many issues in it, and I glanced at the code and really, I wouldn't.
Scary stuff. Huh?
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
Paul Henning looked at it and decided it would take less time to just start over.
Right.
Now, there are certainly some corner use cases that they support and we don't. So there you basically don't have a choice. I can't really name them because for everything I need time synchronization, OpenNTPD does it. For everything I frequently encounter when talking to people, it does it. So I can't really tell you the use cases that we don't. I do believe that they are still slightly better in accuracy, but as said, I believe we are more than good enough. I mean, if we are within 1 or 2 milliseconds, that's less than one tick. Like that's less.
Yeah.
The offset is less than the resolution of the system clock, right? So if you have some weird use case that requires even more accuracy than we reach, you might be better off using that one. Otherwise, I can't really think of a lot.
Okay.
So that kind of leads to the question, how easy is it to switch away from something else to OpenNTPD? And how easy is it to configure OpenNTPD?
That's trivial. That's really trivial. The parser knows about 5 keywords.
That's pretty simple.
Pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's listen, sensors, server, servers, that's for pools. Well, whatever the fifth is. Basically, you can tell it which addresses to listen on. You can tell it to use time sensors. Usually, you just do sensor star and it'll pick up any that's available. And you can tell it which servers to sync to, and that's it. I mean, that's all it should have, in my opinion. I mean, what else? We're talking about synchronizing the time.
Yeah,
We're
right.
not talking about controlling a nuclear power plant.
That's right.
I'm looking at the example config file, and there's only 4 things there: listen, server, servers, and sensor. So
the 5 keywords are listen on, sensor, server, and servers.
There you go.
Cool.
Gosh,
We are
this
IT
is too
guys.
easy.
We are IT guys. We're always off by 1.
Yes.
Right? So, to kind of wrap this up, has OpenNTPD ever had a security vulnerability?
That's a really easy question to answer. Nope.
There you go.
Cool.
There really is nothing I've ever written that had a security problem. I'm kind of proud about that.
Cool.
That's cool.
And
That's a great
of
track
course-
record to keep going.
Of course, that's not just me. That's this wonderful environment. I'm able to develop this kind of stuff, and like the other BSD developers, this crowd is awesome.
Cool.
Very cool.
Is there anything else other than that you wanted to mention before we let you go?
Well, of course, we could always use more donations. These days, we really get most work done at hackathons. And since our budgets have always been pretty tight, we usually end up at universities, which also means that we have to adjust to their schedule when they have room for us.
Right.
So if our financial situation is better, and we don't have to rely on universities, well, it's usually been very nice, but sometimes the timing is just inappropriate. So if we have a little bit better financial resources and don't have to rely on dorms being available, we enable more developers to come to the hackathons, and of course, we can have more. As said, that's where most work is done these days.
Sure.
So it's really important for us.
Cool. Oh, thank you so
And
much
I have
for
to
being
say it
oh, good.
again, I'm so happy that the portable is revived, and big thank you to Brent.
Yes. Thank you.
I think I may have to go throw this into PC-BSD now and switch because I'm tired of the other one too. So, this is cool. Well, thank you so much, Henning. This has been enlightening, and sure enjoyed talking to you. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the interview, but before we head into the news roundup, we want to mention another sponsor on the show this week, which of course is the new sponsor, DigitalOcean, and the URL for that, digitalocean.com. And of course, we do want to remind you, go ahead and sign up now. There's an awesome coupon code you can use. FreeBSD Now is the code word for that, and that'll give you basically a $10 credit, which amounts to about 2 months of their cheapest service, which
Exactly.
is a very awesome way to check it out and see if you like it, see if it's going to work for you. Of course, one of the reasons they're sponsoring is they have added FreeBSD support. So you can do a FreeBSD droplet, and everything's on an SSD. And they got a whole bunch of data centers all over the world. So you can pick the one that's closest to you, or if you want something that's far away for whatever reason, whatever you're doing, like you can do that too.
Yes.
Run the one in Singapore or something. Go for it.
If you want to back it up off-site, you can make it far away.
That's right. That's
And
right.
they also have a great tutorial section, which you can contribute to, but they have a bunch of FreeBSD tutorials already in there. I see there's a new one that was added this week, how to install and configure OSSEC on FreeBSD 10.1.
Nice.
And they have a bunch of other good ones, including just introduction to BSD for Linux users and some of the differences to watch out for as you're doing it. And I'm sure they'll have even more of those coming out soon.
So look at it this way, guys. If you're a Linux user who's been on the fence of running FreeBSD in a server environment, you got 2 months. You can try it out for free. You don't even have to have some hardware laying around that you can put it on, or a VM of your own. You can just fire that up in the cloud, as it were, and start playing with it. See how it works for you. But again, don't forget that coupon code. FreeBSD Now is your ticket to getting those 2 months free on their lowest end package. Which, by the way, what does that come with again, Alan?
512 megabytes of RAM, 2 terabyte of bandwidth, which is lots, and a bunch of other stuff. They have the details of the different packages up on their website. Except for the link I'm clicking isn't taking me there.
Oh, I'll say 512 megs, 1-core processor, 20 gig. Everything's SSDs, by the way.
Yep.
1 terabyte of transfer, and then if you want to do a little more to get started, you can do their more popular plan, which is $10 a month, and that gets you a gig of memory, a 1-core processor again, 30 gigs of SSD, and now you got 2 terabytes a month to transfer. So that's plenty generous to get some services set up and start playing around.
A lot of bandwidth for $10.
That is, yeah. So hosting websites or anything. I mean, shoot, that's a great way to do it.
Yep. And they also, you can rent the machines by the hour if you just need them temporarily. Then you're talking about 0.7 cents per hour or 1.5 cents per hour for those $5 or $10 machines. And then, if that way you can run, 5 or 10 of them for a couple of hours and then turn them off when you don't need them anymore. Mm-hmm. And then your $5 will go a long way.
Yeah, that's definitely neat. Okay, so definitely check that out, folks, DigitalOcean.com. Okay, first up in the roundup this week, we have some OpenNTPD news. We had talked about authentication in our interview we just did. Yep. And we literally just recorded this interview just a couple days ago, but it looks like some of it's already outdated. So that's why you got to stay tuned to BSD Now to stay current.
Yep.
But at the hackathon they were at, which I believe was in Australia, right, Alan?
Yeah, that's why we did the interviews with them from Australia.
So they're still out. Do you know where in Australia, by the way?
It was in the Queensland's University.
Okay, Queensland's University. Well, they had their hackathon, and they already came up with an alternative way where you can do authenticated NTP responses.
Right. So normally, the way authenticated NTP would work is some way of being sure that you can trust the time server you're talking to. It's not secretly run by the NSA and purposely lying to you so that they can mess with your stuff. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of standardized ways to do that, but they're all horrible.
Sure.
And so they were like, what would be the easiest way that we could do to be sure that the answer we're getting from the NTP server is accurate and not being forged in order to try to trick us or something? Mm-hmm. And they came up with, well, every time you make an HTTP request, the server tells you what time it is. So they're like, okay, what we'll do is we can make an HTTP request or HTTPS, right, using TLS to some server and use our existing certificate store to say, all right, this is actually the server we're meaning to talk to, and we can trust that we've verified with the certificate that that's actually a legitimate server that we're happy to talk to.
Who it claims to be.
It tells us the time. Now, we don't want to take our time for that because it's not very accurate, but we can use it as a window. Basically, if the time server tells us is more than 2 or 3 minutes off from that, the time server might be lying, and we shouldn't trust that time server and try a different time server.
Nice.
And it's like, that's ingenious. Why didn't anybody think of that before? It solves the problem and uses existing stuff, and no one had to write any new code.
That is pretty slick, guys. That is pretty slick. So when is that going to make it into the portable version? I'm ready for that now.
Yeah.
Which I think, what was it, Monday or maybe Sunday even, I put OpenNTPD as the default in PC-BSD. So
nice.
Going forward, I would love to be able to leverage that. That's pretty slick. Mm-hmm. But good work, guys. But we got links here to Henning and Theo also weighing in a little bit on some of the backstory of the idea. So you'll definitely want to check those out if you're interested in how that works.
So I guess you remember how we were talking about, in the interview, he's mentioning that there's only like 4 or 5 keywords. Well, there's a new one called constraints.
Sure.
And they have it set up here to check Google, Twitter, and Apple. Probably not the examples they mean to use, honestly. But as long as those 3 agree on the time and the NTP server doesn't, then the NTP server is wrong. And they say, have fun catching the outliers.
Right.
Which is funny because he spelled it out and then liars as in lying rather than laying outside of the curve.
Nice. Yeah, those guys, they come up with some neat stuff over there. But yeah, ingenious idea. Again, looking forward to seeing that happen in the portable version here soon. Okay, next up, you're going to have a lot of pictures to show of us to show here, but the NetBSD open source conference in, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, Oita?
Yeah, something like that.
And Hamanako, which I probably butchered that too, but what the heck? It's Japanese. I don't speak Japanese. But it's been a while since we've featured one of these trip reports, but the Japanese NetBSD users group is still doing them. And of course, they always post a lot of cool pictures, which Alan will be showing there.
Yep.
And they did this last one here in Japan, and we have a variety of pictures here. Everything running NetBSD course from the QB board 2, the Allwinner A20, Raspberry Pi, Banana Pi, Sharp NetWalker, and a couple Zaruses. Anyway, you want to narrate those, Alan, since you can see what's on the screen there?
Yeah, but I don't know what half of these things are.
Right? They're just
there's a Sharp thing. There's some kind of just portable screen. Oh, that one's a Raspberry Pi. Nope.
Oh, no.
I think that says banana. Yeah,
Okay.
that says Banana Pi. That's a Banana Pi, not a Raspberry Pi.
Okay.
And that's the end of the picture. So, yeah, but they have some kind of tiny computer with a keyboard, and that one looks like a phone. And there's a booth with a bunch more stuff. There's some writing in Japanese, but I can't read it.
Right.
That one's Banana Pi running. I'm guessing that's a Twitter client, or if they have some other thing that's like Twitter. There's a Zarus 03. Some of them have writing in the pictures that explains what it is. Some of them don't.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely looks like they had a good time out of their conference.
Well, if any of you guys are going to join us for Asia BSD Con coming up in, what was that, 3-4 weeks away now? Gosh, it's only a month.
I know.
But anyway, these guys usually show up and have a little booth there, or they're hanging around, with, of course, a handful of really cool devices like this, showing you all the stuff NetBSD runs on. So, yeah, you'll definitely want to stop by and take a look at that, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that when we get back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up, Poudriere in a jail. This is something we've gotten a lot of questions about and email feedback, and that's kind of the most requested thing we hear about when talking about Poudriere is how do I run it in a jail? So we got a cool blog article talking about exactly how you can do that now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to walk you through everything, the network setup, the zpool setup, Nginx, making the jail, and then, of course, poking the right holes in the jail so you can allow Poudriere to do what it needs to do. So,
yeah, I remember when I tried to do this before, it wasn't possible. It since has become possible, but I never got around to needing it. They fixed the one bug that caused me to want to run it in a jail. Is before when it would create the jails, it would just keep creating new ones, and so your jail IDs would be in like 32,000 something. And you're just like, that looks horrible. And now when it deletes, it reuses them, and so it doesn't keep causing it to go too high. And so I've never cared to run it into jail since then.
Sure. I want to say on my systems, they're not running in jails because those systems just run Poudriere. And I don't care if the jail ID, none of that doesn't matter to me. As long as it builds packages, which it's doing almost constantly, then we're fine.
Yep. But I can see the advantages to doing it. And
so definitely. If this is something you've been emailing us about, now here you go, the definitive way to do it. You're welcome. Go ahead and enjoy that.
The best part is they actually also include the instructions for modifying the couple of lines you change in the EasyJail config to be able to do it with EasyJail, since that's what a lot of people use for jails. And so that's awesome. So
that's really
it also has a bit of documentation on using the ZFS jailed property, which is basically how you give root in a jail complete control over a specific data set in ZFS. And that way, Poudriere inside can create new ZFS data sets for each ports tree and each version of BSD that you're going to do it on, and so on.
Yeah, I remember when we added support for the word, and that's kind of a neat thing where it's like you give it a data set, and it's like, oh, now I can create all my sub data sets in there.
You can also limit how many sub jails, because jails are hierarchical. Poudriere is going to be creating jails inside of that jail, and so you can limit how many jails it can create, and so on. Now I'm kind of just picturing Poudriere as a service.
Right.
You
download an image, deploy it, and there it goes.
Yeah. Well, it's more like, you pay me and I let you run up to this many Poudrieres in your jail.
Oh, I gotcha. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see some people trying to do that.
Yep.
Okay, well, this next article is something that has me excited. I may have to take a look at this one of these upcoming weekends when I have, some free time. But anyway, something about a brute block, which is another way to stop brute force attacks. And we got a link to an article about that. And of course, we've talked about other methods to stop brute force attacks in the past, fail to ban or deny hosts, and of course, PF's built-in rate limiting. So I'm using fail to ban at the moment, but this brute block is of particular interest to me because it's a similar tool. It doesn't use Python, and it's not for just for SSH. It can do a number of other services, and it works directly with IPFW, which is what I'm using on my firewall boxes now.
A similar tool I've used is SSH Guard, which can also do other things like mail servers. But both SSH Guard and this, what they do actually is in your syslog.conf, rather than having it like read the end of the log file or something like that, you actually have syslog run the program as a pipe and just write the log directly to the program, so it never has to touch the disk. So you can actually decide to log less stuff and waste less disk space, but still have all the logs go through the boot blocker. And like you said, yes, it uses IPFWs and the table feature, so it doesn't fill your IPFW list with all kinds of rubbish. It all goes in a table.
Yeah, that's definitely nice. Yeah, I was reading through this going, I can see ways I would do this. This looks like fun. So I think this will be another weekend project for me at some point to set up. But the article is going to take you through all the different settings you can configure for it. I saw it has like regex support, so you can add like your own custom detection of maybe another service you want to log or whatever. So yeah, this can be very powerful. So if you're looking for something, an alternative to failed abandoned iHosts or something else, take a look at this. Maybe this will work for you. Okay, now speaking of getting excited about something, this was another one where I'm a little jealous and waiting for this to happen, but a new IWM driver has appeared in OpenBSD, which adds support for the Intel 7260 wireless cards, which are commonly found in ThinkPads now. And NetBSD pretty much ported it immediately, which is interesting. They give a little backstory on that. And the pull quote on that is, it was created for OpenBSD by writing and porting a NetBSD driver, which was developed in a rump kernel in Linux user space. So, wow.
So the way I read that, it means that NetBSD created it and then OpenBSD based it on that.
Yeah, or they were using that to do the development of it until they could port it in.
But rump kernels in the Linux user space would probably make it easier to build to work from the Linux driver to build it. So yeah, that's definitely interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So of course, both projects, if you have those particular cards, would like you to help test it and send them feedback if you're running any bug reports.
I see the company called Genoa in Germany paid to have this done, and nice. I think I know why.
Okay.
They build this laptop that has OpenBSD as almost like a hardware firewall. So it's a microkernel based system, and they run an OpenBSD container and then two Windows containers. And you have like your regular Windows that you use, and then a secure one that you use for accessing your company's secure network or whatever. And you can only access the internet through the OpenBSD router that's like a third part of the microkernel. And so they probably needed support for the wireless in OpenBSD, since OpenBSD is going to be the firewall for the whole machine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so basically they had someone pay to get that Linux driver working.
Okay, so now that this has landed in OpenBSD, maybe FreeBSD will land support for that, or DragonFly as well. So guys, make this happen, Adrian, or somebody.
Well, I talked to Adrian. Adrian's problem with the driver is that it doesn't support 802.11n or AC, and it's quite divergent. He thinks it makes more sense to do their own port of the Linux driver because of the framework they're basing it on.
I believe the NetBSD post pointed out that it's dual licensed under BSD and GPL, so that would possibly
because
work better.
the company that paid for it wanted a BSD license, but I think it's because it's they also want the Linux people to be able to use it or something.
Yeah, very neat. Well, yeah, I'd love to see that happen here, folks. So hopefully that'll land in FreeBSD here soon. Okay, and lastly in the roundup this week, this is a little bit of a tease here, guys, so I apologize, but at the same time, I'm not. I've been talking the last couple of weeks about doing PC-BSD current images, and I'm pleased to report that we should have the first of those available this weekend. So the plan is to have one up tagged as 11.0 current February 2015, and we're going to put the month and year in that. Going forward, and then we plan on doing monthly updates, so you will be able to do kind of a rolling current release once a month, and that includes a full package ng repo, so you have access to all your packages, all natively compiled on that version of 11 current, so you don't have to worry about ABI issues. So for the more adventurous among you, this is going to allow testing both FreeBSD and PC-BSD bleeding edge code, so you'll definitely want to check that out.
That sounds like it'll be lots of fun. I'm looking forward to running that on my laptop.
Yes, definitely. So you will want to grab that right away. But anyway, for those looking forward to that, keep an eye on our mailing list. Watch the announcements. Hopefully, have something up. I'm guessing this Friday. I'm going to start uploading packages probably right after we're done with this show.
Nice.
Didn't want to do them while we're
Trying to
doing
use
the show,
network.
using the bandwidth. Yeah, so you'll want to take a look at that. But yeah, this is a great way to test because I know there's been a lot of work in like the DRM code and stuff. So if you want to check out like Xorg and a video, that would be awesome. Okay, it's time to mention another sponsor this week, and of course we're going to go to Tarsnap now. So come on, guys, it's time to get your backups up and running, and Tarsnap's going to make it easy for you to do that. I know we've talked in the past about how cheap it is, and you only pay for what you use. So, Alan, I think you have something on the screen there to show us.
I pulled up my invoice from last month, and you can see I put in $20 credit when I signed up as part of my New Year's resolution to keep doing my backups properly. And as you can see, I have $19.75 left because I spent about 12 cents on bandwidth and 12 cents on storage.
Nice.
For the entire month. And that's doing twice daily incremental backups.
That is fantastic. So yeah, I mean, there you go. You guys have seen it. The proof is in the pudding. You need to get set up with Tarsnap. And of course, this is all encrypted, deduplicated, and it does all the awesome stuff under the hood to make sure that you're not going to have to spend a fortune to have your data stored offsite in an encrypted manner. So we should mention the URL for that, Alan. That's tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Go get signed up. Grab a client for just about anything you need, and just get it set up now. Start your backups. No reason to lose data in 2015.
Yeah, exactly. It's pico dollars. You can afford it.
Yeah, definitely. Put $5 in just to get started. See how long that lasts you. You may be surprised. Done.
Yep.
Okay, so first up this week in the questions, Antonio writes in asking about TrueOS. He said, I'm interested in building a custom version of TrueOS. I've been running PC-BSD as my desktop for a year, and I've really enjoyed it. The next adventure that has caught my eye is creating a custom version of TrueOS. The main motivation of this is to customize TrueOS to my own personal settings, such as a preferred shell, Poudriere repo, salt stack, etc. I'm looking for guidance on where to start. Does TrueOS or PC-BSD have a tutorial write-up of how it's built off of the FreeBSD source? Any help or guidance would be awesome and greatly appreciated. Well, I'll have to post the link here somewhere, but if you go to github.com/PCBSD, there is a repo in there called PCBSD-build, and I don't know if you can bring that up and show it here, Alan, but there are instructions on there. That's basically all of our build scripts, and those will take our sources and pull stuff from the Git repo and whatnot and build PCBSD/TrueOS images. I mean, that builds the installer images right there. So you can take that, you can customize it, point it at your own repo if you're going to do your own repo. Those build scripts work with Poudriere, so you can even point it at your ports tree. And so if you're customizing ports, setting different options, like that can all be done. It's actually pretty simple. Just forking the PC-BSD repos and then on your build scripts, just pointing them to your repos instead of ours, and it'll pull those, and you'll want to let them build. If you're going to do a full build of the entire ports tree, I mean, that's going to take a while, unless I think my system here is 16 cores. It's got 178 gigs of memory, and so I run everything in RAM, and it still takes me like 30 hours to build the entire ports tree. So it's not a small thing to do, but if you have access to some horsepower and can make that happen, it's really not too difficult to set up. We've not posted a tutorial on this in the past. Maybe this is something I should do, though.
I don't know that many people building a custom version of it, but like it sounds like mostly what he just wants is a custom package repo, and he can just build that with Poudriere and then change the config file and
and just changes, I mean, his user shell, simple salt stack, he can customize that. But anyway, that may be something, perhaps email us on the PCBSD mailing list and give us a little more detail on what you're trying to do, because maybe that's overkill, like Alan suggested, for what you're trying to do, and all you need is some of your own packages.
At the same time, I could see wanting something that you could use your fancy network installer or whatever, so that when a server boots up, it installs a version of TrueOS that has preceded with salt stack already installed, and the salt stack's configured to check in and pull stuff down, and so you can literally just network install it on a bunch of servers, and they'll all start doing what they're supposed to from salt and your custom package repo. I've looked at basically making an overlay on top of the regular FreeBSD installer for my servers as well.
Okay. Well, I see Latera here's on chat saying he'd love to see a tutorial for this applied towards hardened BSD. So yeah, hardened BSD is similar enough. There's no reason why we couldn't make that happen. So I'll see if I can write a tutorial up at some point to do this. That way you can roll your own custom images. And basically you could use pretty much all of our source, just point the FreeBSD port tree at your own and build them, and away you go. So anyway, yeah, we'll have to get in touch, but I'll put that on the list and talk to TJ, the producer. Maybe that's something I can do a small tutorial on, and we can show how to make that happen. So if you guys want to fork it and do your own thing, that would be cool.
Awesome.
Okay, so next up is Richard asking about backups. He says, love the show as always, especially the new Foundation series. He said he has a question on backups, though. Recently, you mentioned about backups, Tarsnap, and all that. My question is, how long is your chain of incremental backups before you decide to do a full backup again? My understanding is that incremental backups lead to more points of failure as you need the complete chain to reconstruct the file system. Do you do a full weekly, monthly, or backup followed by daily incrementals? So how do you do that, Alan?
It depends on your setup. It's the way Tarsnap works is different. You're not actually doing an incremental. You're doing a full every time, but it's deduplicating the parts of that you've already uploaded.
Sure.
So each archive stands on its own because of the deduplication. So it's not actually doing incrementals.
It's not like back in the tape days where you had your one master and then you had to, replay all the other tapes till you got back up to Thursday, which, was 5 days later or something.
Right. Now, there's a middle ground, right? You have your full backup and your incremental, but there's also what's called a differential backup. So normally you would do a full like once a quarter or once a month or something. And then a differential is everything from the last full to now. So it's like a super incremental. So you do that maybe once a week, and then you have your incremental. So at most, what you would need is the differentials for 3 days or whatever, and then, the incremental for the 3 days since the last differential, and then each that one differential would be enough to go back to the full, or depending how you do it, it could be go back to the previous differential or whatever, and allow you to need fewer pieces in the chain instead of if you're only doing a full backup once a quarter, you don't want to have to rely on, at a worst case, like 90 separate incremental backups in order to get back to the full. So that's where the differential comes in. Also,
there's no reason to need to do that anymore.
No. Also, if you're using something like Bacula, it has the concept of what's called a synthetic full backup, where it takes the full that's already uploaded on the remote site, and then it takes an incremental or differential, and it basically merges them. So it makes it updates your full backup by applying the incrementals on top of it. So you now have a new full backup without having to re-upload any of the files that haven't changed. So Bacula has some interesting features to deal with that as well. Especially, if you're backing up a huge amount of data over a relatively slow connection, you don't want to be uploading files that didn't change once a month or something like that.
Well, even I say applying this to ZFS, when I replicate my desktop to the FreeNAS box under my desk, it does do incrementals in the sense that it's only sending the latest snapshot, but everything's still on the FreeNAS box. Like
right.
I can pull it all
Again,
back.
with ZFS, you're using the incremental to walk forward and have all the data. Although by default, it will keep the older snapshots for an amount of time, and that allows you to have access to each incremental as a unit, but they're all applied on the live system to give you the full version.
I think I keep like a week's worth of nightly backup, so I can go back to a file from any time in the previous week or whatever. But that definitely works as well, and it sends the smallest amount of data possible over the wire.
So it depends on what type of service you're using. If you're using Tarsnap, then it solves the problem for you with deduplication. If you're using Bacula, you can use differentials to mitigate the number of incrementals, and you can use synthetic full backups to merge your incrementals and differentials on top of a full to make a fresh full without having to re-back up any of your files. And then other solutions have other things like that. But in general, the way I did it when I was using Bacula was incrementals once or twice a day, depending on the data. With the computer store's sales database, it would back up during the lunch break and at the end of each day, so that at most they would only lose half a day of stuff.
Makes sense.
And they would have paper records and so on to deal with that. And then we'd have a differential run every Sunday or whatever. And then at most that way they would need to get back incrementals to get back to Sunday, and then that differential would take them back to the last full, which was once a month.
Okay.
And then that would cap so that they wouldn't, if you did just incrementals in a full once a month, then you're looking at having to need 30 separate incrementals to get back to what you want. Right. And if you're doing full once a week, you could be, if you're doing off-site, then you're wasting huge amounts of bandwidth possibly. If, especially with something like a sales database where once the data's in there, it never changes. It only ever grows kind of thing.
Okay, next up we have Charlie who writes in asking about a laptop SSD. He says, my X201 has a 128 gigabyte SSD. I'm going to be installing FreeBSD 10.1 on a ZFS root tomorrow. At some point, I want to be able to upgrade to a 256 gigabyte SSD, but without the hassle of reinstalling a new system from scratch. What's the recommended method for cloning the 128 gig ZFS disk to the new 256 gigabyte disk and then growing the file system to make use of the full capacity on the new drive? Can I just use the DD utility or use ZFS send to move data sets? I hope the answer isn't too painfully obvious, but I do appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, so we'll answer that part of the question first.
Good. Yeah.
So ZFS has built-in support for this. There's the command zpool replace. And so zpool replace the name of your pool, the old disk and the new disk, and as long as you can connect both disks at once, it will just do it. And when it's done, it'll spit out the 128 gig disk to be used for something else after. And then if you just do zpool online -e for expand on the 256 gig SSD, it will grow to the full size and offer you the additional space.
Nice.
The thing to
So that command doesn't stamp like bootloaders or anything.
right.
So Alan, you still have to do that.
So when you're done the zpool replace, it will even remind you, hey, you need to update your bootloader if you boot off this disk. So you'll want to do the partitioning first before you do zpool replace, because you want to replace using just the one partition, so you leave space for the bootloader and so on. So the quickest way to do that is the gpart command has a backup and restore feature. So if you do gpart backup old disk pipe gpart restore new disk, it will copy the partition table basically from the one disk to the other disk. Then you can just do gpart resize on the new disk to expand the pool, the partition that's holding your ZFS data to be bigger than what it was on the 128 gig drive on your 256 gig drive. And then you're done.
That's almost too easy.
You can do ZFS send. So you could create a new pool with a different name or something and ZFS send all your data over. Or the same one name, I guess, if you had separate machines. So you can use ZFS send, and that might actually give you a little bit of defragmentation, kind of. But in the end, that'll be slower. And
you're on an SSD too.
With the SSD, the fragmentation is less of an issue. So in general, the zpool replace is the best way. But ZFS send definitely will work. DD can work, although because ZFS assigns a globally unique ID to each disk, it will then be confused when it sees two disks with the same ID. And so it's not the best way to do it, but it can work in a pinch.
Sure.
If you plan to use both copies of the disk or something, the zpool reguid command, reguid, will regenerate all the global unique numbers on the pool and the disk so that it won't match the other disk and it'll stop any confusion going forward.
Yeah, and also since it looks like you're on a laptop here, the best way is probably if you can get your hands on one of those SATA to USB cables so you can plug them in at the same time and do this. I know those are fairly cheap, $10 US won't cost you a lot, but get one of those. That'll just make this whole process a heck of a lot easier using the first method Alan mentioned.
Yeah, instead of needing another computer or pulling the disks out or whatever. My machine can take two hard drives, but one of them is a spinning drive and one's an SSD in the setup I have now. And so if I wanted to upgrade my SSD, I would have to use a USB thing or something. And
Okay.
So that's definitely the best way to go.
Okay, so lastly, we have Ben asking about a GELI. He says, I think I remember you saying that you got a change committed in time for 10.1 so that the GELI password only needs to be typed once during the boot time for a multi-disk setup. If each disk uses the same password from the second disk, it would try the previous password before prompting the user again. This doesn't seem to be working for me on my FreeBSD 10.1. I always have to type the password 4 times. Am I mistaken, or is there something I need to enable to do this? And he lists all his loader.conf and all that jazz.
Right. So that was a change Colin Percival did, right? And then
Yeah.
you were inspired by that to get him to extend it to so you could do it from Grub.
Well, no, it was the other way around.
Oh.
I had the support in Grub first, and I bugged Colin about, like, is there some way I can pass you the password so it doesn't prompt me again? And we made that work, though. But
well, he did the
sure,
separate one. He wanted it to, because he has multiple disks, he wanted to not have to type his password multiple times, and he was working on it anyway. Yeah.
Or it'll use them all. Now, it looks like he's doing this from FreeBSD, not PC-BSD,
Right.
so not Grub.
Right. In particular, the thing I'm noticing is he has this GELI set up in rc.conf, so it's happening too late, I think. Possibly. I don't actually know.
Yeah, is this not his boot device?
Yeah, that's the part where I'm confused, because he's got a bunch of this stuff is under rc.conf, and so it would happen much later in the process. So I think it must not be his boot device, because rc.conf isn't read at that point.
And I don't see like a VFS root mount from or anything like that, so it's probably not booting from ZFS.
Yeah, I think the code only applies when you're doing it at boot time.
Yeah, I believe so.
Because at the end of boot time, it erases the password it's stored in memory. And so that might be the problem. So I don't know exactly what you have to put in your loader.conf to make that, to make it do it then, but that might solve the problem. I can see the advantage for a pool that you're not booting off of. Having it happen later in the process means it wouldn't get buried in all the other demessage stuff. So I can see the advantage of doing it the way he's doing it.
Well, what I'm wondering is, Alan, if this is, since he's using the GELI GPT flags and all that, I wonder if the rc.d script needs some love, where it can hold that password and then try it for the next device. It might be re-asking for each one and not even have any concept of using the same password over again to test it on the others. So we'd have to look into that and see.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting idea, Ben, where we may have to get somebody to give that script a little bit of love there and make it work.
Forward this email to Colin and see what his thoughts are, because he's the one that wrote the reuse the password stuff.
Definitely, yeah. And hopefully, I mean, if it's in the rc.d script, it might just be something a little bit of shell scripting can fix.
Yeah.
Just retry the same password over a couple times. But anyway, we will have to look into that and get back to you, Ben.
Yes, we hope to be able to help you with that one.
Well, another thing is, I'm not sure, where is it prompting you for the pass? Oh, well, I guess it's prompting you later on. It's not like you're typing it at the bootloader.
Right.
So, okay. I got you. Yeah, because the way we do it is you type it at the bootloader, and then that passes it into the kernel later, so you don't have to retype it again, which we found a bug with that this last week with spaces in the password, which is interesting. You need to put quotes around everything, right? Whoops. Okay. Time for some mailing list gold, folks. So first up this week, contributing LLVM patches to, looks like this is going into Emacs.
Yeah, it's the debugger in Emacs. Yes. So somebody proposed a patch that would add support for LLDB, which is the Clang/LLVM debugger, to the Emacs generic debugging tool interface thing called gud.el or something. I don't know. They have weird names for their stuff.
Yeah.
And then Richard Stallman piped up saying, it looks here that there is a systematic effort to attack the GNU packages. The GNU project needs to respond strategically, which means not by having each GNU package cooperate with each attack. For now, please do not install this change.
Wow. Yeah,
basically,
I know this made some news in the week, about Stallman saying this. So.
Yeah, so his fear is that LLVM and Clang and LLDB are replacing GCC and GDB, and that's bad for his software freedom, and so he thinks that patch shouldn't be allowed into Emacs.
Well, then there was a follow-up to this from Eric S. Raymond.
Yes.
You want me just to read it? Because it's...
I'll read it. Anyway. So Eric S. Raymond sends an email with the subject, Defending GCC Considered Futile, kind of reminiscent of that GoTo considered harmful and many other such email threads. It says, speaking as the original author of GUD, which is the Emacs debugger thing we were talking about, I'm in favor of it supporting LLVM and everything else imaginable. But I hadn't been planning to weigh in on this question until I realized that Richard and everyone else may be carrying around a false premise. Namely, that GCC's dominance in its functional category can be preserved. So he doesn't think GCC can stay as the default compiler for things.
Sure.
He says, I'm pretty sure that this is not true. If the Clang/LLVM people decide that they want to eat GCC's lunch, they will do it. The reason has nothing to do with the philosophical issues, but merely the fact that compiler technology has advanced significantly in ways that GCC is not well positioned to exploit. The Clang LLVM people have both a clean sheet technology advantage and Apple's money to fund a high quality implementation with. The Free Software Foundation cannot match either of those. Already, my own experience suggests that LLVM is a superior compiler by every metric I know of, at least in developments or deployments that don't require bug-for-bug compatibility with GCC. That's interesting. I remember David Chisnell mentioning that a lot of programs are not written in C. They're written in a particular version of GCC.
Right? They rely on certain bugs to make it do certain things.
Well, it turns out that the FreeBSD kernel had that same problem.
Yeah, it did.
Not necessarily GCC, but just depending on the compiler doing something that wasn't actually in the C standard. Anyway, continuing. If GCC were to vanish from existence tomorrow, I'm not sure I myself would even be seriously inconvenienced. Set cc equals clang in one dot file, problem solved, done. Obsolescence happens, and this is nobody's fault. It will happen to Clang/LLVM someday too, but today is not that day. I don't have to completely agree with the Free Software Foundation's strategic goals to advise that its planning needs to take this into account. The probable near future obsolescence of GCC means that positive positioning of Emacs as more important. The absolute last thing we want to do is make it less attractive for Clang/LLVM users. And too long didn't read is you can't beat Clang, join it.
Okay, we're going to try our new segment this week, folks. We're going to be doing a discussion segment, and of course, based on ideas you guys have sent in, things you just want to hear us discuss. And this week, we're going to be talking a little bit about ways to tunnel your traffic, which, different alternatives and whatnot. Obviously, if you've ever done this, you've probably used OpenVPN before or seen it. That's the big one, it seems like. That's what I've used. I'm sure you've used it, Alan, right?
The OpenVPN is the one I've used the most.
Same here.
Back in the day, I used to use the PPTP because the client was built into Windows and that had advantages. But, that's been known to be bad for a long time. So I stopped using that. I've used IPSEC a tiny bit, but I've never tried to set one up. It was always ever just to connect to one someone else has set up somewhere.
Well, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about is some of the different ways you can do the same thing here. But, of course, OpenBSD has, how do you pronounce it, IKED or IKED?
IKED, I think.
Yep, and then FreeBSD's IPSEC, and of course you can do the same thing over OpenSSH.
Yep,
and then
the chat room is mentioning SSH-L.
Yep, definitely. And of course, lastly, you got Tor, which is kind of a whole nother ball of wax, but you can accomplish the same thing. But personally used OpenVPN, like you said, PPPTP or whatever back in the day. I think used that for like all of a month before switching to OpenVPN. But IPSEC I've never played with, Alan, and reading through the handbook, it looks like you still have to compile it into the kernel. It's not just a kernel module you can load.
By default, but adding an option to the kernel is not that bad at this point. I think there's some talk about trying to get that in for 11 as well to be on by default, or at least be a loadable kernel module instead of having to be compiled in.
I was going to say that would make it a lot easier and a lot easier to get a hold of and test and play with, because I know people don't want to have to compile kernels if you can help it.
Yeah. So I guess just starting with OpenVPN and talking about advantages and disadvantages. So OpenVPN is doing SSL, so that's the type of encryption that you use for a lot of other things. And so, it's known good, heavily tested, and works that way. The other advantages to OpenVPN are the fact that there are clients for every platform, Windows, Linux, Mac, etc.
iPhone, Android.
Even iPhone and Android. So you can tunnel from your phone if you're in an extremely bad circumstance somewhere in some country or something. You can even tether to your phone and then VPN to your home or something in order to get your laptop connected if you really need to. The downside is that it has a little bit more limited set of ciphers and message authentication codes that are supported, and it doesn't have some of the speed improvements that you might be able to get.
Like no GCM or CTR or AES and Looks like only CBC mode.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's just something that they haven't got around to or if it's a compatibility thing. I can definitely see how adding it to a new version could cause confusion if all of a sudden people can't connect or whatever. The other thing is it uses certificates for authentication, which can be a bit of a faff to set up as a regular end user. If you're doing a bigger install, it works very well. But if you're just trying to do a small thing, it's like I have to create my own certificate authority to do this.
Right. And that could be a little bit more of a pain.
But if you're using something like a pfSense, it does it all for you. And the other great thing with pfSense is that you can also just be like, give me IPSEC as well. In addition, and it can set that up as well.
Okay.
The other big thing that differentiates the different types of tunnel you could do here, whether it's OpenVPN, which is SSL/TLS, IPSEC, whether it's OpenBSD or FreeBSD or whatever, or OpenSSH, is the way they do the encryption. So there are basically three ways to do sending an encrypted message. The one is called encrypt then MAC. So what you do is you encrypt the secret message, and then you create a message authentication code, which is kind of like a secure hash. And that's how you can tell when the message gets to the other side, you can verify that the message hasn't been modified.
Sure.
Then you can also encrypt and MAC. In that one, you create a checksum or a hash of the plain text. Then you encrypt the plain text, and then you attach the MAC of the plain text to the end of the message and send it. And this means that when the person gets it, they can decrypt the message and then make sure it wasn't modified. Whereas with encrypt then MAC, the first one we mentioned, you can check that the message wasn't modified before you try to decrypt it, which could be good because it means that if there's a bug in the decryption thing, that somebody couldn't custom craft a message so that when you try to decrypt it exploits your decryptor or whatever. And the third way is to MAC then encrypt. In that one, you calculate the hash of the plain text message, and then attach the authentication code to the end of the plain text message and encrypt both of them. In that case, you can't use the MAC unless you successfully decrypt it. So all three ways work, obviously. SSL, SSH, and IPSEC are all known to be secure. So it comes down to your requirements and a couple other things.
And a lot of times what clients you're using and whether they can talk to that.
I guess one of the other advantages to IPSEC is most of the point of IPSEC is not only to make a VPN or whatever, but you can also verify the source IP address on every packet. And that basically you make sure that nobody's modified the packet while it was in transit and that the source of the packet is actually the real source of the packet.
Okay.
So, but because of that, it's a bit more to set up.
Sure.
Right. Sure. And the biggest problem is that on a LAN, you can share the keys between the machines or whatever, and then the machines can trust each other, and it's easy. When you're doing it over the internet, you needed some way to verify that the remote end, because you're not going to know about every single remote end like you might on a LAN. And that's where IKE comes in, the Internet Key Exchange Protocol. And that's why OpenBSD has the IKE V1 and V2 support.
Yep. So IPSEC, it looks like, has Windows, Mac, and Linux clients as well. Are you aware of any like Android or iOS ones, Alan?
No.
Off the top of your head? Okay.
I have used the built-in IPSEC client on Windows to connect to a VPN in order to one of the ISPs we have. They use IPSEC VPN for the IPMI interface for managing the servers. So I now have a mix of some places use OpenVPN, some use SonicWall, which is the same idea as OpenVPN, and then some of them are using IPSEC. Okay. So I've used them all.
So a couple things that differentiate the IPSEC implementations on OpenBSD and FreeBSD. So on OpenBSD, the IKE2 protocol is the only one we're aware of that supports the IKE2 protocol.
Well, that's BSD licensed.
Okay.
It's the only implementation we know of that's BSD licensed. Yeah.
Sure. And then the FreeBSD IPSEC was recently updated to support AES-NI and AES-GCM. So,
yes, that was work done by John Mark Gurney that we interviewed him about, and that was co-sponsored by the FreeBSD Foundation and Netgate, the company behind pfSense. And the goal of that was to be able to do IPSEC VPNs at 10 gigabits per second.
Wow.
to be able to encrypt enough to not bog down the CPU when you actually have to encrypt that huge volume of traffic. And so that definitely has big advantages there. If you need to push a lot of traffic, having support for AES-NI and letting the processor do a lot of the work in hardware rather than in software definitely makes a big difference.
Okay.
And like we mentioned, AES-GCM is that extra secure fast mode that OpenVPN doesn't have yet.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the other methods here. So next up, we have SSH tunneling. And of course, SSH, some of the cool things you can do with that is throw it on port 443. So it looks like SSL traffic, which is pretty slick, especially if you combine it with S-tunnel, which is usually available on most systems. Often you won't need to install anything extra. Of course, it's cross-platform and very flexible with different ciphers, key types, and MAC, of course. Or optionally, if you prefer, you can throw some certificates in there. And you don't need to learn a whole new system or protocol, just a few switches.
Yep. The downside to SSH is that in general, what you do is you have SSH listen on a local port, and then you proxy connections to that. And so you use like a SOCKS proxy or something. So the advantage/disadvantage is that you can pick an individual application like your browser and have your browser proxy through that, but everything else on your desktop isn't. So that's an advantage, but at the same time, it means that, for example, if your browser launches Flash, does Flash end up using the proxy? And if not, then Flash could be leaking your real IP when you don't want it to. But the biggest advantage to SSH is that you can do SSH chaining, right? Remember, we did a tutorial on this. If you have a machine that's behind 2 or 3 layers of firewalls and only allows connections over a LAN or something, you can actually use SSH to tunnel to a Bastion host and then into that private network. And then you can still proxy your applications to be able to get in there and do whatever it is you need to do, instead of having, with VPN, it would get much more difficult. And so SSH, and it has the advantage of there's clients for everything, and it's something that is already going to be in most places. And it definitely has the flexibility that you're looking for.
Yeah, so that's definitely one option, of course. And last but not least, if you really want anonymity and you could put up a little bit of slower connection, you could take a look at Tor as well, which of course is going to offer about the best anonymity you could ask for, because it's going to have multiple relays in between everything. Of course, you don't control the endpoint, so one thing to consider is you need to use HTTPS for sensitive traffic.
Right. Tor is about making your traffic anonymous. It makes sure that other people can't tell who sent the data, but it's still just sent in plain text. So you have to use the regular encryption, like HTTPS or SSL or whatever, to make sure that the people that are running the exit nodes where your traffic leaves the Tor network can't see everything that you're saying.
Yeah,
they can't tell who is saying it, but they can read the message, which might give away who's saying it.
Sending your credit card info out,
or even just a message that happens to mention who you are or something, and then you've just blown all your anonymity.
Yep. So definitely a lot of different ways to do this. Of course, some things are going to work better in certain situations than others. So take a look and set it up to anything that you'd like to get configured on your local box, which of course will allow you a cool way to do VPNing in a variety of different methods.
So if you have any questions, comments, or show ideas, topics you want us to cover, what you want the next discussion segment to be about, please write into us at feedback@bsdnow.tv. And also you can watch live on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is 1900 UTC. And we look forward to having you in the chat room.
Definitely. We enjoy interacting with you guys live. And one thing we do want to mention, right on time for this episode, the ISC-NTPD team just announced more security problems. Yay, more patches going out. So keep an eye on that, I'm sure. And maybe more of an excuse to look at OpenNTPD for your system.
Yes, I think you said you imported it into PC-BSD the other day.
Yeah, I did just a couple days ago, and it's on in our Edge repo, and I'm liking it so far. It's nice and clean and small, and it just does what it's supposed to do. So hopefully it won't bite us with any security issues down the road, which, based on their track record, I rather doubt it. But this kind of stuff makes me glad we're switching. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great week. Thanks for being with us on the show this week, and we will see you next time.